Good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you and your families are all well and keeping safe. My name is Bassam Fattouh. I'm the director of the Oxford Institute for Energy Studies. It gives me great pleasure to be chairing this session in which we'll try to cover a number of themes. What is the future of the energy sector? What are the implications of the energy transition? Can the current crisis accelerate the shift to sustainable, decarbonized economies and resilient, inclusive societies? What is the future scenario for the EastMed? To answer these questions, I'm very delighted to have with us Mr. Lapo Pistelli. Mr. Pistelli is the Director, Public Affairs of ENI. Good afternoon, Mr. Pistelli. It's great to see you again. I hope that you, your family, and our colleagues at ENI are doing well, and I very much look forward to our discussion today.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Lapo. Let me start by asking you, in your professional life, you have seen many extreme oil price cycles. How is the current shock different? Do you think it will have enduring impacts on the market and the energy industry?
Okay, one could expect that the energy industry is used to live with volatility, with prices going on roller coaster. I have to say, as a first statement, that this COVID-19 pandemic crisis has been really unique. On the one hand, it has been unique because of the death toll. You know that actually the death toll of this pandemic has risen to something like 1.5 million victims in the world. But what I would like to emphasize is that this kind of crisis has been like a perfect storm, because we have experienced at the same time, on the one hand, the pandemic, as I mentioned before, secondly, a global recession. And usually, the DFIs were saying that you have a technical recession if you have a growth which is lower than 0.5. Now we have a few countries which will end up the 2020 with a positive sign, with a plus something. All the rest of the world will be minus 4.5 or 5% of GDP. We had high unemployment, and at the end of the day, we had also some phenomena like the globalization, the disruption of global value chain. And so energy was affected among the most. The sector was one of the sector was affected the most. We had a drop in oil demand by 9 million barrels. We had, I would say more than that, an oil and gas investment drop, which according to the IEA is more than 30% related to 2019. So the crisis has hit very hard. I think that it's gonna take a long time to recover. According to the IEA, I think that we have to expect early 2023 in order to rebound and to go back to the level of demand that we had before the crisis affected the whole world. So yes, I think the impact has been very hard. It's going to take a long time to recover.
Okay, so in a way, this shock is special in the size of its impact, and as you said, for instance, on the impact on investment in particular, has been quite severe. Now, how is ENI been responding to the current shock? You know, keeping in mind that this has actually occurred at a time when the energy industry was already responding to the challenges associated with the energy transition. So in a way, it is a dual challenge. So you mentioned the economic recession. You mentioned that this is quite a special shock, but at the same time, you're also responding to the challenges of the energy transition. So how ENI has been coping with all of these challenges?
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. Let me start by saying that looking at the crisis, but especially looking at the energy transition, we didn't start from scratch. So what we have done in 2020, is taken from a big strategy whose foundation have been laid by Claudio Descalzi 6 years ago. So what we needed to do was to try to speed up some processes, but we were ready to do that. And so I could say that COVID has not impacted the long-term strategy, but somehow it has even accelerated it. And we have taken a number of measures considering all of the value chain, of the energy value chain that we are covering in ENI. Starting from upstream, we have been able to, first of all, to develop our portfolio of oil and gas, trying to maximize efficiency in our project and lowering down the break-even of our project. And at the same time, we have been implementing a new set of measures concerning CCUS. We will talk about that in terms of energy transition and forestry offsetting project in Africa. In the midstream, we have taken a number of measures to decarbonize gas. We know that gas is going to play a role in the transition, but we have taken strong measures in order to decarbonize gas. And in downstream, we have been able to, we are speeding up some processes about the conversion to traditional refineries in biorefineries. So, I mean, is the whole world of circular economy and the research for new advanced biofeedstock for refinery. But if you look at the financial level, we were forced to make severe savings and severe cuts. So in 2020, we have reduced capex by roughly 4 billion, and we have implemented cost efficiency. But at the same time, we have allocated additional $800 million in green capex. So at the end of the day, this has been successful. Investors and analysts have said that this strategy has been reliable and resilient. And we have been able to place successfully our first 2 hybrid bonds by collecting money for a total of 3 billion. So if you want to survive these tough years into energy transition, you need to be resilient, effective, and flexible. And I think that we did that way.
Absolutely. I think resilient is a key word here. But what you're describing is a very complex process. And I want just to ask you, from your observations, do you think governments and industry are investing enough to achieve the very ambitious transformation of our energy systems? I give you here an example because I'm based in the UK. The Prime Minister recently announced a 12 billion plan to start what he calls the Green Industrial Revolution. Are we underestimating the costs of the transition, but also the time that it takes to transform the energy system?
Sam, I think that this is a key question for the conversation, really a key question, because I'll tell you, my perception is that there is basically a very strong commitment worldwide about energy transition. So how can I say? I don't think that we need more advocacy. I mean, we are all persuaded about that. So the big issue is about setting reliable and affordable final destinations on the one hand, and to set milestones that you can verify. So at the very beginning of this year in 2020, I remember in the first quarter of the 2020, some analysts were saying, look, guys, you will see transition is dead. Because at the end of this crisis, people will have to go back to basics, business as usual. There's no money to transit the energy system, so you will see. Then something happened, not only in Europe, but also I would say in Washington, D.C., and also in Washington in the sense of the IMF and the World Bank. So an enormous stimulus package. And a part of this enormous stimulus package or rescue package is devoted to energy transition. So now what we have to do is how to invest an enormous amount of money in speeding up transition. And you know that the Next Generation EU that was approved in summertime from the European Council had a couple of pillars in the strategy. One is the digital transformation, the other one is the energy transformation. That said, I want to be clear about that. First of all, how transition is going to happen. So I wouldn't like to be blunt, but sometimes I think that people think about energy transition like the fairy tale of Cinderella and the transformation of a pumpkin in a carriage. So it's going to happen overnight, everywhere in the world, with the same impact, with the same technique, with the same method. It's not going to happen that way. So transition is going to take some time, and it's pretty clear that in this world we still have 800 million people, basically in Africa, who have no time to talk about transition because they do not have access to energy, and we have a couple of billion people, especially in Asia, that would like maybe to talk about transition, but for the time being, are keen to catch up the level of energy consumption that we have here in Europe or in the States. So the debate on transition is more and more nuanced. What I think is that it's going to take time on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's not a free ride. It's not a free lunch. So it's a costly process. And so my basic reaction is that we are fully involved in this process. We are trying also to help our government in Italy to provide a successful transition plan about energy, providing projects in all of the domain, in consumption and production, hydrogen, a lot of things. But what I think is that, how can I say, because we are talking, having always in mind the European scenario, my third recommendation would be, look, we have to invest a lot of political capital outside Europe, because Europe is the forefront, is the vanguard of the energy transition. Actually, we are producing less than 10%, 9% of the global emission. In 2030, if we are determined to pursue the project, we will be less than 5% of the global emission. So after 2030, Europe will not be the problem. The problem will be elsewhere. So we need to persuade the big guys in Asia, not only India and China, but I'm talking to Indonesia, to Vietnam, to Bangladesh, the US, a lot of big guys, to be on board on the same page. Because otherwise we will be the forefront, but we will be, a cage, a box in a complex world. And last but not least, the energy equation from now to 2050 is something where you have, on the one hand, governments, energy companies, and companies who are consuming energy. But on the other hand, you are the people, we the people of the world. So in order to solve the equation, we have also to involve the consumers, the private consumers, and the citizens in order to change the way to consume energy. So I think this is the landscape. And let me tell you, Europe is well positioned, but we don't have to be selfish. We need to invest more political capital outside and not to set too high ambition in a short time. Energy transition is not the fairy tale of Cinderella.
You put it very nicely, but I think you also raise a very, very important point, is that the energy transition is not going to proceed smoothly across the globe. It's likely not to be uniform. And that's why there's a lot of things to need to be done to encourage transition in other parts of the world. Now, let me turn to a question that I always like to ask people that are engaged in the industry. Oil and gas companies are turning more and more to what we call energy companies, investing in low carbon technologies such as solar, wind, and generating electricity. Where do you see a company like Eni a competitive advantage in this area? For instance, are you concerned that shifting your portfolio will reduce the return on investment? Because to me, it seems that shareholders want both. They want a transition and a rapid one. At the same time, they want high returns. Is that feasible? Is that something that you could deliver?
Yeah, it's a good question. Let me tell you, it's clear that climate change is reshaping the industry. And it's not only climate change. We have a very strong bottom-up pressure. It's coming from academia, it's coming from customers, it's coming from our families, it's coming from media. But we have a pressure also coming from, I would say, top-down. And when I say top-down, I say governments are setting the scenes, are setting the rules, are setting the norms. And on the other hand, the shareholders and investors. So my basic answer is that the energy companies have to be considered and are part of a solution and not part of a problem. Because the energy transition dilemma or equation is something that requires big technology, big investment in technology. And so I could talk about Eni, but we have more or less 8,000 patents, proprietary patents. So I'm talking about technology related to industry. And we know that the history of energy is a history of innovation. So you need a lot of innovation to transit from one model of energy to another one. So I think that the big guys in energy are part of a solution because they can deliver new projects and new technologies to get to the final destination. And then in general, as an industry model, the energy companies are able to manage complex projects, and transition is a complex project. That said, I can tell you that 3, 4, 5 years ago, investors usually were asking you about your proven reserves, about a certain project. No one was asking about transition and new businesses. Now it's happening. So the landscape has radically changed. But I can tell you that you were saying there is a decoupling between the high returns and the kind of business that are related to the transition. My personal experience, even though I don't deal with investors, other guys in the company are doing that, but I was part of that conversation, is that investors are smart enough. They know that the new businesses have no that kind of rate of return. They're asking you a different question. They're saying, look, guy, you were among the leader or one of the leaders in the traditional energy model. Are you able to become the energy leader in the new model of producing green energy? I'm not expecting that you will provide me the same rate of return. I know that the spectrum is different, but I'm expecting that you will be on the top in that kind of return that new model of energy are providing to investors. And that's the real challenge for us. We are now energy leader in the traditional way to produce energy. We want to be leader even in the next model of production of energy.
I see. So the challenge is actually to prove that you are also leader in the new world, in the decarbonized world as well. And that is a separate question from the returns. May I ask you a little bit about your traditional business?
Yeah.
What role for gas and LNG you see in the energy transition? And what efforts is INI taking in reducing methane emissions? And may I just add a quick question, is it correct to say that INI's resources strategy is heavily weighted towards gas as a way of reducing upstream gas emission intensity, and reducing the company's carbon footprint? Is that a good characterization?
Yeah, okay, it's a good set of questions. Okay, let's start by a general assumption that according to every kind of scenario, gas is considered one of the sources of a transition. So the best way to transition from hydrocarbons and fossil fuels to renewable one. If you just take the IEA traditional scenario, you will see that gas is playing in 2040 still the 25% of energy demand. And among the three traditional fossil fuels is the one there's a real future for a number of decades from now. What we are doing now, on the one hand, we are modifying step by step the production mix of our traditional portfolio. So actually, we are more or less 50-50 oil and gas. We will be 60% by 2030, and we are planning to have gas as 85% of our production mix in 2050. And just the fact that you are switching from 50-50 to 85-15 is lowering down your carbon footprint. Then it's about technology, and I would say that it's about carbon capture. This is a very tricky and big game, the game about carbon capture. What we are planning to do is to apply this technology to our power plants in order to produce, on the one hand, blue power, and on the other hand, blue hydrogen. So gas is crucial either for the production of blue power or for the production of blue hydrogen. And what about the methane leakage? I mean, from that point of view, we can give you or give to the public good news, because when we started our strategy about the reduction of the carbon footprint, we had a target, and the target was taking the baseline of 2014 to reduce the methane leakage emission by 80% to 2025. We did it in 2019. So we did it 6 years in advance with our target of 2025. And actually, we have a technology that we call leak detection and repair, which is applied to 90% of our upstream assets. So we think that we can, I wouldn't say easily because it's costly, But as far as we promise to take down to zero the flaring of the gas 2025, I would say that in the same period of time, we'll able to take to zero also the methane leaks.
Okay, that's you mentioned hydrogen, and I would like actually to push you a little bit on the issue of hydrogen. How does hydrogen fit into ENI's strategy? Would you say that LNG and developing blue hydrogen with CCS in Italy are priority areas? And what would it take to get actually hydrogen to enough big scale to make a huge difference?
Okay,
I'm asking a lot of probing questions, but
then you have to,
I'm taking advantage that you're with us.
Very good. No, then you have to tell me if you hire me or you fire me on the examination. But okay, I can tell you that I would like to start by quoting a former Scandinavian prime minister. I will not say from which country he's coming from. They're talking about hydrogen, said in a recent event, a very, iconic statement. He said, okay, look, guys, hydrogen, there's a lot of debate about hydrogen. We need to avoid that this energy fashion of today will become the write-off of tomorrow. So we were talking before about how complex is the transition. So this applies, I wouldn't say especially, also to hydrogen. Because if you look at the state of play, ENI in Italy is the largest producer and consumer of hydrogen, traditional hydrogen. We are doing that by steam reforming, and we are producing 370,000 tons of hydrogen per year, and we are basically using it in our refinery as a feedstock. So it's a traditional use of hydrogen. But what we want to do is to, let's say, fit our strategy about hydrogen to fit on two different levels. The EU strategy on hydrogen that was launched in July by the German presidency, and to fit the national plan on energy and environment of the Italian government. And there are some ambitious targets there. So what we want to do is to move from the gray hydrogen to the blue hydrogen. I was mentioning before the production of blue power and blue hydrogen. Also because of one fact, that we are always talking about the supply side of hydrogen, and we're not talking about the demand side of hydrogen. And in Italy is the second largest manufacturing economy in Europe. We have a big amount of hard-to-abate industries, paper, glass, chemical, refineries, And these kind of industries cannot be electrified. So you need a vector which has a sufficient energy density. And so hydrogen could be the solution. But we need to, I would say, set up a market that actually doesn't exist. So what we want to do is to invest on carbon capture and storage. We have this project which is called Adriatic Blue, and we are competing also within the framework of the Innovation Fund in Brussels. We want to produce blue hydrogen because we have technology and competence to do that. But we have to clearly understand that we have to do that not only because of some environmental targets, but because we have to set up from scratch a market that doesn't exist. And we have to protect traditional hard-to-abate industry from the risk of carbon leakage. I think that this could be the biggest contribution that ENI could provide to the national industry in Italy.
That's fascinating. In a conference like this, it's very difficult not to talk about the East Med. So in the recent past, we have seen strong gas developments in the East Med, and some discoveries are already reality, while others are still expected to come into the future, such as Lebanon and Cyprus and the rest. ENI had always and continues to have a leading role in this area. In your opinion, what is the future scenario for the East Med, and how will it impact the European area? And as a company, are you still excited about the East Med?
Okay.
Despite of all of the difficulties, it's not an easy area.
No, East Med has been the preferred topic of our conversation during the Med initiatives in the last couple of years. Because, in the last couple of years, our discoveries in Egypt and our participation in exploration rounds in Cyprus, in Lebanon. I mean, we're among the things to look at. We didn't change our mindset because we still think that the EastMed has an incredible potential, and this potential would be an enormous benefit for the countries of the region. On the one hand, because they could have affordable and sustainable energy. And some of these countries are still relying on a very costly and polluting energy mix. And on the other hand, because energy can be a playground for competition, but can be also a playground for cooperation. Let me tell you, Bassam, because I'm reminding my I would say historical genetic code as European, that the European community started by sharing energy resources, by sharing coal and iron in the early 50s. So those resources that had been the playground for two, I would say, world wars, and for many competition between France and Germany, they became the core pillar of the first integration of energy in the European history. So I still think that there's a lot of space, political space, to integrate those economies and to integrate those different political governments. From this point of view, I think that the EastMed gas has done, received a lot of improvements in recent years. They transformed themselves in an international organization. Energy diplomacy works if you look at the case between Israel and Egypt, or Israel and Jordan, or Jordan and Egypt. What is not working? It's not working in the northern part of the basin. So the big issue is Cyprus and Turkey. So it's pretty clear that from this point of view, I would say the landscape is frozen somehow. We need to, governments need to create some creative solutions to unblock, to unfold this issue of Cyprus and Turkey. But the lower part of the basin is working. A very short statement about what this implies for Europe. I will be very simple. We don't have to talk about the EastMed gas pipe. Let's talk about the resources that can be useful for the European demand. They can be liquefied also in the Egyptian facilities and taken to the European market. What is relevant to say is that in the European strategy, we need to diversify sources and suppliers. So the EastMed is not something that can, let's say, replace other suppliers or other routes. It can usefully complement what is existing now. So let's look at real numbers. It's not a world game changer. It's not even a European game changer, but it can usefully complement the European strategy.
Absolutely. And in that mix, don't forget Lebanon as well. I know E&I has a lot of skills in dealing with very complicated political areas, but I think some of the countries are going to test your patience a lot. I think we have a question, time for one more question, and I would like actually to broaden it a little bit, and would like to ask you, what role does the Middle East play in E&I's strategy?
Yeah, an increasingly bigger role, because we have been historically around the Gulf areas, because we were and we are in Iraq, we were in Iran and we left, but historically we were not in the Gulf. Now we are there, and that happened in the last 2 years. We have been able to sign, if I'm not wrong, 16 or 17 different agreements. We step in 3 countries: United Arab Emirates, Abu Dhabi, Sharjah, Ras Al Khaimah, in Oman and in Bahrain. It's clear that the Gulf area is still the place to be, because in traditional energies, you find there 50% of proven reserves of the world. But more than that, let me tell you, and also because it is the place where you have the lowest developing and operating costs. But on the other hand, it's also a place where you have a lot of new ideas and new technologies. Mm-hmm. So some of these countries who are traditionally considered as the giant player of a traditional energy are moving fast and furious into the future. They are talking about new technology for producing renewables. They are talking about new technology in new smart cities. I mean, it's a place to be. And we have been able to step in there. Let me tell you that that was based on technology. It was not based only on, I mean, yes, it's built upon trustship and friendship with the people there, but I would say, secret formula to get there was technology. And because, as I told you before, transition towards the future is based on technology and competence, there you can find highly skilled and competent people. And so I think that technology and competence are the pillars of this partnership that is taking a greater role in E&I strategy.
I think you mentioned an excellent point on the technology, especially after the G20 has endorsed the circular carbon economy as well. That's
Yes.
very, very important. As you say, the region will have to play a role also in the decarbonization. Look, Lapo, this discussion really would have gone for a very long time, but I'm afraid we have run out of time. And all is left for me is really to thank you for your very deep insights and openness. And I really hope to welcome you soon in Oxford.
Let's see you soon.
I look forward to it. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.